see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
And he came home early from his work one day and heard me playing boogie-woogie. And he ordered me out of the house.
But he said, no, some white kid named Elvis Presley, right?
In America, no one had ever seen that kind of fame. In America and everywhere else.
He was just real, natural, funny. He loved to tease.
A simple boy from Memphis who became really close to everybody in the world.
The truth is coming out today in our show dedicated to extraordinary talented man, one of the most famous stars in the world, legendary Elvis Presley. We'll meet with lyricist and composer Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who were recipients of many awards, Pat Brodsky, wonderful American writer, and Valerie Allen, talented Hollywood actress and Elvis lover. The Love Triangle of 50s, legendary manager Mac Grafe, young actress for Paramount Pictures Valerie Allen, and rapidly rising star from Memphis singer Elvis Presley. She didn't know how to handle this relationship. It was absolutely beyond anything that she could imagine. But let's go back to the 50s, to the fabulous Las Vegas. The minute she graduated from the high school, Valerie Allen moved down to Las Vegas, dreaming of being actress.
We're just having a marvelous time. We start going around town auditioning. Everybody turned us down. Everybody. But as luck would have it, and often does, the Sands, the famous Sands Hotel, was changing the whole line. And they were looking for new faces, new girls. And so we auditioned, and by that time we had met a lot of the girls. And so now we were in like bobby socks and, you know, sweaters and looked like schoolgirls. We now had on the long black stockings and the leotard and the makeup and everything.
So you get this school, you get...
As we're in rehearsal, we're downtown. I think it was the two of us. Mm-hmm. The only two that couldn't really dance, but by the time that show opened, we could dance. And that's where my life started in terms of the business, show business for myself. Everybody came there, everybody, because Dean Martin was there, and Frank Sinatra, Lena Horne, Danny Thomas, Milton Berle. You know, it was just the hotel at that time. It was fabulous. But my goal was to go back to New York and study, and I had saved up money. I had saved my money. And I was going to take that money, come back, say goodbye to my family, you know, and go back to New York and seriously study acting. But as life would have it, I met a wonderful gentleman, Mac Gray, who was Dean Martin's manager. And he said, before you go back to New York, why don't you come over to the studio and see Dean? And, you know, I said, oh, okay. So I came down here. I was saying goodbye to all my high school friends. And then I thought, gee, you know, before I go back to New York, maybe I should call Mac. And that changed my whole life. Anyway, long story short, the more I said, no, I do not want a contract, the more they said, why? And of course, by that time, I had fallen in love with Mac, so it all worked out perfectly for me.
Valerie, your life is like an American book. It's like a book about survival, about Hollywood, about your family. So you came to this old romantic Hollywood with fantastic people around you,
yes,
who treated you very well.
At that time, it was at the very, very end of the great golden era of Hollywood, the very end. So all those people from that era were around. I mean, on the lot was Clark Gable and Gary Cooper and Bill Holden and, of course, Dean. And it was just a wonderful time. It was a very small studio, very small in those days. And we were like family. We all knew each other.
we have pleasure and honor to meet Pat Brodsky, person who worked a lot in Hollywood, worked for Los Angeles Times. Tell me about Elvis. He was born a poor boy, as I heard.
Right, he was born in a tiny little two-room shack in the backwoods of Mississippi. His father and other family members built that shack with their bare hands. And Elvis Presley was a twin. He had a brother who was stillborn, and Elvis came after his brother. And the whole time he was growing up, Elvis's mother, a very hard-working woman named Gladys, who had a very strong bond with little Elvis, kept telling him, you survived for a special reason. Your brother died so that you could live and have the strength of two people. So from the time he was very little, Elvis Presley shouldered this big responsibility because he was told he was special. They lived on welfare. Elvis Presley is one of America's most famous welfare cases. And he also had relatives who were poorer than him even, and they would come and live in the Presley household. So sometimes there was his grandmother, and there were his aunts and uncles and cousins. So it's funny, but Elvis Presley, when he was growing up, knew what it was like to be very poor.
So when you were in Hollywood at Paramount Studios, you practically met a lot of people, as I said, but then you met Elvis Presley, who became a pretty big part of your life.
Yes.
How did you meet Elvis Presley?
Well, I met Elvis, okay, at that time, again, if you were working on the lot, you could drive onto the lot, contract. If you weren't working, you parked outside, you know, in the lot adjacent to the studio and walked to the talent department, which I was there a lot doing scenes with actors and studying and so on and so forth. Anyway, I parked my car and I walked through those gates, and over to my left on the Western Street was this extraordinary looking young man. And he was throwing a football, which I later found out, to his cousins from Memphis. And I looked over, and then he looked over, and that just happened right there. And I kept walking, went to the talent department. I'm doing my scenes, I'm working all day, it's now dark. I come out of the talent department, down the steps, and standing on the left, turning right toward me, is Elvis. Hi, I'm Elvis Presley, and I'm going to be here on the lot. I'm under contract to Mr. Wallace. And everything was Mr. and Miss, the Southern way. It wasn't an affectation. That's just part of the charm. So that's when I first met him.
So you met him and you knew that he likes you and he was waiting for you. And as usual, man approaching woman, he's afraid that he will be rejected. Did he was tense a little bit?
He was a little nervous, but he had a wonderful security about him. You can imagine, which I didn't know then, all these girls were screaming all over the country over Elvis Presley. He just hadn't reached Hollywood yet in that magnitude. It was just before it all burst open in terms of really this major star. Here we just knew there's a singer, very well known, from Memphis.
When he was in high school, he had a car that had no windows. It had a big sheet of cardboard in it that he would hook into the window, and the doors wouldn't lock, and he would tie the doors with a rope to close the door. But he had a car, okay? He got around. But that's why when he got famous and got all his money, you know, he wanted Cadillacs and convertibles.
Elvis Presley came to Hollywood to accomplish his childhood dream to become an actor. But the money machine wanted Elvis Presley to just do movies for his fans so they could have a soundtrack album to sell afterwards. They didn't care about Elvis Presley being a serious actor.
When Elvis came to Hollywood, the town was kind of mean to him. He was Southern. They thought he talked funny. They thought he ate funny things. He brought his friends with him, a group of guys known as the Memphis Mafia, and they were Southern boys like Elvis. And they talked funny, they called everybody y'all, and, I'm fixing to do this, and I'm plumb tired, and, they talked Southern.
So in Hollywood also existed some kind of censorship and some kind of interests which move people around and push them to do sometimes what they didn't want to do.
Hollywood didn't think, he was going to last, and so they didn't treat him very well. And it was in Hollywood that Elvis Presley finally kind of retreated. He said, I'm going to make my movies here, I'm going to do my job, like my contract says, but I'm going to create my own world here, where I can do what I want.
Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller have been writing songs for over 40 years. They wrote dozens of hits. Artists who have recorded their songs include the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, James Brown, Jerry Lee Lewis, Aretha Franklin, and many others. Series of hits began with Big Mama Thornton's recording of Hound Dog in 1953. This song suddenly became a huge hit by a young white kid named Elvis Presley, but by that time, when Elvis was rising up with a new Hound Dog, Mike Stoller was on a sinking ship in Atlantic Ocean.
And I was fortunate enough to get off of a sinking ship, the Andrea Doria, in 1956, and was in a lifeboat and eventually picked up by a freighter, and that freighter eventually got to New York, and Jerry was waiting for me at the dock with a dry suit in case I was soaking wet, and also with the news that we had this big hit of Hound Dog, and I, of course, assumed that he was talking about Big Mama Thornton, but he said, no, some white kid named Elvis Presley.
He had this talent. He had this remarkable talent as a little boy, and he would sing in the black churches, and they called them holy rollers in those days, the churches where church meetings would last all day and night long, and little Elvis would go and sing and run up and down the aisles with everyone.
For him, it was natural to move like the, let's say, the Holy Rollers or the Baptists do sometimes when they're singing, particularly the great black rhythm. When they sing, they move, even if, their whole body is with that rhythm. And he grew up with that. And you've heard the story that in the beginning, a lot of people thought this was a black singer.
I never looked for trouble, but I never ran. I don't take no orders, I'm no kind of man. I'm only made out of flesh, blood, and bone. But if you're gonna start a rumble, don't you try it all alone, because I'm evil.
When I see the quality of an actor, I can recognize, it's like, my self-casting control equipment. So when I saw Elvis in his movies, how precise he was, how deep he was, and you need only sparkle of it to get sense of it, because most of his movies were on surface. Why they didn't let him go farther?
He had every hope and dream of being a great actor. He wanted to be like James Dean or like Marlon Brando, one of those guys. He loved their movies, and in fact, when he grew up, he used to go see the movies all the time and dream of being a movie star. Valerie Allen, who knew Elvis very well in the 50s, told me about the time she saw a screen test. It was a scene that Elvis had done from a play. It was a William Inge play, a great American playwright, and it was called The Girls of Summer. And Elvis was playing a young man caught up in a relationship with a young woman who is no longer interested in him. She's listening to music coming in from outside a window as Elvis tries to tell her how much he loves her, how much he cares for her. And he did the scene very emotionally, very effectively. And when the scene was through, it was run for an acting class at Paramount Pictures. The acting coach turned around to her class and said, "Now that is a natural-born actor."
Elvis was really, symbolically, as a singer, he was really the melting pot. He took everything in and synthesized everything. The one of the major reasons I respect him so much is that he never sounded like he was imitating Ray Charles or Eddie Arnold or anybody. But he would take all those styles in and it would come out as his own. He was really an original, highly original, eclectic but original. And he did make a couple of sides for us. We have to talk about that. We have to acknowledge that we feel are maybe one and two of the best sides ever made of our songs. And Love Me, as a ballad, is the best ballad we feel that we've ever had recorded, and it's by Elvis Presley.
He had certainly a great deal of influence from both blues and other black
country singers
and other black forms of music and black gospel music, but also white gospel music, country music, and all the popular singers like Dean Martin and so on and so forth. So his was an amalgam, really, of a lot of styles that ultimately became his own. And he was very special, and I guess that's why he's still considered as special as he is.
But as a woman, you'll tell you back. Put a chain around my neck and leave me anywhere. Oh, let me be. Oh, let it be.
So you were 20 years old probably when you met him.
I was probably going on 19.
It was a story by itself. It was a triangle. You were caught between two men who were absolutely different. One was older, whom you adore, and Elvis. He was focused. He loved you.
I was too young to understand that you can be in love with two people. Now, the intensity is going to be different. And therefore, I didn't know how to handle it. It was absolutely beyond anything that I could imagine. I thought I had the whole world with Mac. But when I finally, with him, it was like someone my own age. And it became this magical, intense, passionate relationship that I did not know how to handle. I did not want to hurt Mac, and we were this close family on the lot.
Elvis always felt he was being watched to some degree. You know, it's well known that Elvis had some kind of unhealthy eating habits, Southern eating habits. And when he was doing recordings in the studio, the Colonel would sometimes call into the recording booth to see if Elvis was eating anything between songs. And Elvis didn't like that. Yes, he felt that the Colonel was watching him.
He went into this relationship with full heart,
yes,
and as you said that he was calling you my girl, and
Will you be my girl? That meant just the two of us and no one else, you know. And be my girl meant, can we be together? And I couldn't be.
Once you said, Valerie, about Colonel and group of people around him who manipulate the situation. They were afraid to lose control over Elvis because he was such a great moneymaker. He didn't want some kind of independent relationship where they couldn't control this relationship. Was it true?
he was such an important star, rising rapidly, and his manager and Hal Wallace, they didn't want him involved with anybody, and they saw this attraction, you know, and they knew that we were seeing each other secretly. I, of course, thought no one knew, because, I mean, everybody thought, you know, because of being in Las Vegas, oh, she knows everything. She didn't know everything. She was very naive. I was very, very naive. I just thought if I kept it secret and we met over at my little apartment in Hollywood, no one possibly knew.
When you said about, you know, we're sitting in commissary and talking, his intensity, because, you know, the actor, when you're intensive, you know, everybody can read from your
just
look.
Yes. One day, Elvis said, let's go in the commissary and have lunch. And I said, no, we can't go in the commissary and have lunch. Everybody will say, well, that's all right. You know, we're both here on the lot. I said, well, all right. So we go in. The whole commissary turned around. We're sitting at this table for two, right in the front, and everybody's watching. He's oblivious to all of it. I'm feeling every bit of what the real intention of this looking is. And he says, you know, I talked to Mr. Wallace today, and I told him, I said, Mr. Wallace, I'm just crazy about Valerie, and I want her in all my films. And I said, you didn't say that to him, did you? He said, sure I did. I told him I want you in my films. And I'm feeling this heat from all these people. And he had a rather wonderful speaking voice, but strong. And everybody seemed to have stopped talking. I said, now Elvis, now I'm thinking, oh, should I go back to New York immediately tonight? I said, what did Mr. Wallace say? And he said, you can have her in any picture you want, but not on this lot.
Your love with Elvis, it was like two fires met with your character and his character. It was addicting. It was, you were understanding each other. You were absolutely fit for each other.
I think I showed you that sweet note he left at the door where he'd come by several times one night. Darling, came by twice, stop.
We'll call you
later,
stop. Love you, honey, stop. Elvis Presley. Here we discover Valerie and Elvis, right?
Yeah, I love that picture. And it's on the set of Hot Spell. And what's interesting about that was the set was closed. And Elvis came on anyway, and he came on with the photographer, and he said, we're going to take a picture. And there it is.
We're talking about love. And it was tragic love for him and confused love for you. And he told you, you're my girl, I want you to be my girl. So tell me, at the end, when he went to army, it was a party. It was a party, farewell party or something.
It was a
Farewell.
going away party in the executive dining room of the commissary, and the colonel was sitting on one side of him, on the right side, and I was sitting on the left. And it was a very, very tense atmosphere, I can tell you that. And at the time, I thought it was just because, well, he's going away and we're all going to miss him. And then, of course, later on, I realized the tension at that table, what it was all about. Because obviously, Elvis had said, I want her sitting on the other side of me. And so the colonel was sort of looking over my head most of the time. I mean, it was really, and I was smoking away.
He insisted to invite you and put you close to him. Did he say something to you?
Well, to be honest with you, as I remember, his left knee was rubbing against my right knee. And he had started it kind of, I guess, or we probably started together. And that was how we were communicating at that table, basically. And then, of course, later on, the photographers had taken the pictures and everything, and everybody was dispersing and going back to the set or whatever. And there was just Elvis and myself, and the photographer had moved out of the room, and the cake was still there, which was his going away cake. Good luck, Elvis, you know, we'll miss you. And he said to me, don't you wish that was a wedding cake?
Anyway, with your life, you feel happy about meeting such a wonderful, open, talented person who loved you.
I do. It's a wonderful memory. It's a wonderful, wonderful memory to have.